Hi there folks, and welcome to our latest feature on 60 years of the synthesizer with computer music. In this edition, we're going to be using our very own Zebra CM plugin to create another classic sound from the 60s. This sound is going to be modelled on the lead sound that was heard on the classic Tornadoes track produced by Joe Meek called Telstar. Strictly speaking, the sound wasn't created on a synthesizer because the term synthesizer didn't come into being until the late 60s. But it did use a really amazing musical instrument called an ondioline. Being regarded as cutting technology for the era, it was used on this track to evoke a real sense of the future. So let's begin. We're going to start by initializing our plugin. So once you've opened your favorite DAW, we're using Logic here, load up an instance of the Zebra CM plugin. We're now going to go to the display and menu at the very top of the plugin. We're going to click, come down to Init, which stands for Initialize, and reset our patch. The Zebra CM plugin is equipped with all sorts of really complex waveforms. So we're going to load the first one up on Oscillator 1 by moving to the left-hand side in the Oscillator 1 section, placing the mouse over the waveform icon, and then clicking and holding with the left-hand button on the mouse. We then drag the mouse upwards, and we want to be watching the display at the top as we're aiming for a value of 11.40. It should sound like this. That's quite a reedy sound, I think you would agree, and it's the kind of thing we want for our patch. Now we need to replicate the exact same sound on Oscillator 2. So moving to the Oscillator 2 section, click and hold with the mouse, drag the value up to 11.4 so that we get the exact same sound on the second oscillator. At the moment we can't hear Oscillator 2 because the volume is turned down. So staying within the Oscillator 2 section, click and hold on the volume pot, and we're going to drag that up to roughly the 10 o'clock position so that it reads a value of 60.00. Oscillator 2 is actually going to be playing one octave higher than Oscillator 1, so we need to transpose it. We do this by moving to the tune pot, clicking and holding, dragging the mouse up to a value of 12.00, and that value relates to 12 semitones. There are 12 semitones to an octave, hence that will play one octave higher. Next, we need to change one of the global settings on the Zebra CM plugin. So we move to the global setting, which is over on the left-hand side here, and you'll see that it currently reads at the top poly. This means it's currently able to play more than one note at one time. The ondioline was a mono machine, and this meant that you could play phrases in a certain style that would lend itself to monophonic performance. Consequently, we need to change this to mono by clicking on the word poly and selecting mono. This now means that it will only play one note at a time. Now we should hear our sound a little bit like this. Next we're going to add one of the most iconic components of this sound, which is its vibrato. The sound is actually very heavily modulated with vibrato on the track, so we're going to do our best to replicate that. We need to employ a low-frequency oscillator for this purpose, or an LFO for short. Let's move to the LFO section. This is on the right-hand side of the plugin, and we'll be working with LFO 1. Just to check, make sure you have LFO 1 highlighted in blue. The LFO that we want is going to be relatively quick, so we need to move to the rate pot. We need to click and hold and drag it up so that it has a value of approximately 130. You could alter this to suit your style of playing and your style of track, but we're going to go with 130 as it's quite close to what we want for Telstar. Now we need to tell LFO 1 to talk to the tuning of Oscillator 1 and Oscillator 2. To do this, go back to the Oscillator section. We'll start with Oscillator 1, and you'll see to the right of the tuning pot there is a tiny blue dot. First thing you should do is a right click or a control click on that and make sure it is assigned to LFO 1. If it's not, all you need to do is select it from the drop down menu. Then do a left click in the exact same location and set the value to 1.00. We now need to do the exact same procedure again, but on Oscillator 2. So once again, we're going to do a right click, select LFO 1, then we're going to click on the dot with a left click and drag it to a value of 1.00. You will now hear a sound like this. Even by the standards of Telstar and the ondioline, that's a very heavily exaggerated vibrato. So we need to lessen that slightly, and we can do that using the amplitude control, which is in the LFO section. Moving back to the LFO section, you'll see the amplitude control at the bottom here. We need to do a left click and hold on this and drag it down to a value of around about 40. This means it will reduce the amount of amplitude for the wave that is being sent in the direction of the oscillators. Consequently, it has gone from being very exaggerated to something a bit more palatable. Now we've got our classic ondioline sound, we can play a line, which for copyright purposes we're not playing quite the same here, but you'll get the idea. And also because of the monophonic performance, when you play a line such as this, you can hear that it's not able to play 2 notes at a time, so it sounds very tight as a lead line. So that's our Cosmic Satellite patch. We'll see you in the next edition.